Three, two, one. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome, everybody in the U.S. and around the world. You're listening to Baseball Outside the Box. Can't thank you enough for joining us. Don't forget, before we start, thank you to ESPN Honolulu for joining us, and all of you in over 100 countries. Cannot thank you enough. You've really helped us get the show out. Remember, this is a show that loves to interview baseball's best coaching minds who love the challenge, the status quo. And let me tell you, we got a great show for you today. But before you do, let me tell you this. Don't forget, help us out. Continue to do it. Go to baseballoutsidethebox.com for the audio. Check out Peter Caliendo, YouTube, also Facebook. Subscribe, get the show out, and we will continue to try to bring you some of the greatest shows in the game of baseball. And today, it's a special one. And I'll tell you why. Because we have a gentleman who is the head of MLB International. I'm going to introduce him in a second, but let me tell you, he's a Chicago guy. Yes, grew up in Boston, but then went to Chicago, Adlai Stevenson High School. I'll tell you later on how I learned about that. He's got a BA in journalism, MBA in finance. Now he's got a big background. We're not going to go through it all, but listen, Chicago Cubs, assistant director of PR, also with the Rangers, Nike, public relations. I mean, he's got so many backgrounds, 15 years overseeing the growth of baseball, actually 16 in Asia. And the commissioner of baseball asked him to be the MLB senior vice president of international baseball. What a great, great individual and a huge responsibility. As you know, we're in over 100 countries, but there's a lot more playing baseball all over the world. And one of the reasons is because MLB has been so progressive in developing the grassroots level and also the high levels of baseball around the world. We're going to talk to the man in charge of this, Mr. Jim Small. Jim, how you doing, buddy?
Pete, I'm doing great, and thanks so much for inviting me on. I love what you do, what you've done with WBSC to help grow baseball around the world. Everything that you've done, and I love the show. So it's an honor to be on, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I know your times, you got a lot of things going on, and you'll be going to Turin, Italy. I'll see you there in a couple of days with the European Championships. So let's just rock and roll and get started, because I think, you and I have something in common. That is, we do what we do because we love the game of baseball, especially the international game. I love MLB and I love the game in general, but, it's something special internationally. So before we start, talk about a little bit about, what you think, why you think international baseball is so, special, and why you have a passion for helping the game out in all, around the world.
You hit it right in the head. I mean, we grew up in the United States, and so baseball's been part of our lives, our entire lives, right? And so we've been involved with it, since since I was 4 or 5 years old. But to go to the Czech Republic, or go to Brazil, or go to even Cambodia, some of the places that you and I have been to, and see people that care as much about this game as we do, it's both humbling and it's really, really cool. And so I am really, really lucky for the past 23 plus years to bring, America's pastime to the world. And it's a really, really cool thing to do.
I'm looking forward to talking about some of the things you guys have done and some of the things that you're, going to be doing in the future. But let's start with this. Let's talk about, since you've been involved in the game worldwide from the beginning, what are the major differences that you've seen in, internationally that's really helped develop the grassroots level and also the elite level?
So, one of the things that we talk about in what we're trying to do with growing the game and obviously then growing, hopefully, our business is creating social permission for kids, boys and girls, and their parents to come to baseball. And the best way I can describe it, growing up, as you mentioned, I grew up in Boston in the 70s, and there weren't a lot of kids that played soccer, really, unless you're, little unique, or you're a foreign exchange student, or you didn't decide that you want to play football, basketball, hockey, or baseball. Nobody played soccer in my town, and so that changed, right? And it took a generation to change, because the social permission came for kids throughout the United States to play soccer. And that came through more participation programs. It came through the success of MLS, the success of women's soccer, I think, in the United States really helped bolster that. So now you have great athletes who choose to play soccer in the United States over football or basketball or baseball. We need to create that same social permission for kids in non-baseball countries to come to the game of baseball. And I think that's what I've seen more and more in places like the UK or in Germany or in France or in China, where kids can say, hey, baseball is an international sport. I want to go play. And I think one of the things that's been really, really impactful for that and really sped up the way people have embraced the game is social media, is digital media, the ability for people to sit in Delhi, India, and be a Chicago Cubs fan because they can see the product, they can consume the product. You know, Pete, you and I are so old that, you know, I'm sure you remember when you first started going to Italy, trying to get that USA Today, you know, the next morning and see what the scores were from almost 2 days ago, right? Now, when I go to Europe, I'll watch a game on my phone. So that has really helped us, I think, grow participation, grow consumption of baseball, and for us, for Major League Baseball. So I think that's the biggest difference, is just the speed at which the game is growing around the world, and the people that are involved in helping it grow.
Hey, folks, thanks for joining us on Facebook, man. We got a lot of people. If you got any questions for Jim, just type it in the comments section. You know, you brought up an interesting point, and look, you know, MLB, you guys got an organizational plan that's outstanding. I know you showed it to me, and what a plan you have, and you've had a plan for a long time, obviously, but it continues to evolve. One of the questions, and I think this is globally, right? You mentioned the word soccer. Soccer's so big globally that, you know, over the years, you know, whether you're in Europe or Latin America, it doesn't matter. You've got to compete against it in some ways. And just to give you an example, I was doing a coaching program in Cuba. Been fortunate to be there like 9 times. And one of the questions came up from one of the coaches, you know, what about all this launch angle? My kids, you know, are 12 years old and they want to talk about launch angle. So technology is big. But they also brought up the most important thing was they're losing some players to soccer now. I mean, this is Cuba. This is the heaven of baseball, right? Just like the US, that's all they do is play baseball there. So what's MLB done? Some suggestions, you know, to grow the game, because you do have to compete against a sport that has a lot of action, right? When you're a young kid, I played it. There's a lot of action in it, right? Baseball sometimes can be a little slow. What are some of the things that you can combat to kind of battle that and say, well, baseball's fun also, but you got to show that?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. You know, it's not just that baseball can be you know, slower. It's very nuanced, right? And that's what we love about it. We love the nuance of baseball, and we've seen that in the research that we've done, which is the people that we get to become baseball fans love the game similar to the way that we do, right? That there is no clock, that there is you know, that there's value in making an out if you're moving a runner from second to third, or obviously third to home in a sacrifice. Those are things that take time to understand. So we know, and again, the research tells us that there's a correlation between participation and consumption. So if you've played the game of baseball as a boy or a girl, you are much more likely to be a baseball fan, and you're more likely to make sure that your kids come on that journey with you when you're an adult, right? That they become baseball fans. So participation is really, really important. What we've tried to do is create simple hooks for this nuanced sport. And so some of those things are, we have a program that we run in about 10 countries around the world called First Pitch. It is a schools-based program that is very, very easy to understand and easy to start. It is essentially t-ball, but it can also be played as kickball, right? We play kickball sometimes as kids. Yeah. You know, a lot of kids at 7 years old, 6 years old, don't have the skills to catch and throw, or if one does, the other one doesn't, and that's a problem because one kid throws really hard and the other kid can't catch. Kickball is a good way to as an alternative to that. We look at what the WBSC has done with Baseball 5, and you know, it's spectacular, right? It's again, it's easier. It drops some of those barriers. So simplifying the game so people can come to it, grow with the game, and then enjoy the nuanced nature of it later. One other thing that we're looking to launch soon, we had success in something in 2017 in Hyde Park in London. It was a home run derby, and we had some former major leaguers, Sean Green and Carlos Pena and Cliff Floyd, a few other guys. And basically, it was called the Home Run Derby X. It was a combination of all the things that are kind of fun about baseball, right? It's the culture, it's the music, it's the food, but it's also simplifying the game. You don't need to understand a drop third strike to appreciate some guy hitting bombs, right? That you ball, if you hit the ball over the fence, it's a point, right? That's simplifying our game. And we're looking at taking that in 2022 global and taking it to different cities in Europe and in Latin America and in Asia as a way to help, again, create a simple hook for a nuanced sport. So there's a lot of things we're doing. There's a lot of things that the WBSC is doing, you know, to make sure that everyone feels welcomed to become a baseball fan.
Yeah, and I can speak on it with the WBSC. I agree. What a great program, Baseball 5. And again, reaching those young kids, you don't need a lot of equipment. It's one ball, you bounce it, you hit it with your hand. You know, it's hand-eye coordination. It's easier to hit, a lot of action. I think that's what kids are looking for. And the other part of all this, Jim, is, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but it's a kind of I know there's a lot involved in the middle, but it's a kind of a two-pronged system to stay balanced, where you have to grow the grassroots level. And even as a federation, and maybe speak to the federations around the world about this, but also, you know, they're concerned about the high level, the national team program, because that gets funding from their Olympic program. So you got to be careful, you know, that you don't overload one or the other too much. You kind of have to balance it, right?
Absolutely. You know what, on the participation side, we talk about a participation pyramid. And at the bottom of that pyramid is reach. So it's getting as many bats and balls in boys and girls' hands as you can, right? Mm-hmm. And generally for us, that's schools program. So, you know, in China, in India, in the UK, you know, in Mexico, we're going into schools, often with the government, to put baseball as part of the phys ed curriculum in a place where it might otherwise not be there, right? So that's the reach part of it. But on top of that, on that pyramid, you have to have retention, right? So retention is play. So if reach is just getting the bats and balls in kids' hands, you need to bring them on a journey. And that next step up is retention. That could be, you know, we work very closely with Little League to try to make sure we're clustering Little League play programs near first pitch schools so that those kids have a place to go after they're turned on to the game. And then at the top of the pyramid is elite development. So taking the kids that either want to or have the capacity to play at a higher level, to give them the coaching and the instruction that they need to kind of take that next step and play for a national team or play for a college in the United States or Canada or in their local markets, and hopefully to be able to play in Major League Baseball. The reason why that's important for us is because, I don't want to get too much in the marketing speak here, but we have a virtuous circle that we talk about. So if you imagine in the upper left quadrant of that, you know, participation, right? So kids have to play the game. And then you go down to that and you have, you know, more elite development of players. And that leads into major league players. And that leads into more popularity for the sport because the game is seen on television. You know, our licensed products are sold more. And that leads to more participation, right? So it's this virtuous circle that everything's kind of connected. And we have that in a place like Japan and the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico and Korea. What we need to do is develop that in other parts of the world. And that's what we're trying to do.
You know, that's why I really wanted to have this show. I think this is outstanding for people to listen to. And I tell you why, because, you know, Major League Baseball being out there in the forefront, everybody always looks and says, sometimes they might say things like, well, they're interested in selling this or selling TV or selling wearables or shirts and all that. It is a business, but it's also a business to help develop the sport worldwide. So you have to have both of those. You can't just give away everything and not make any money.
Right. Look, there is clearly, we know that we can do good and do good business, that those two things are not separated from each other. And we know how important participation is to the growth of the game. The thing that I've tried to change on our side is we were, I think, a little, I don't think we're focused enough. I think for many years we tried to help out people. Somebody has a baseball program and they need some bats and balls, and we're like, okay, well, let's try to help them. And it really wasn't, as clearly focused as we would have liked it. And the result was, we didn't really help as much as we wanted to grow the game. So what we've decided to do is to really focus on a handful of markets. As I say, we over-index on these 5 markets, and these are places where over the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to spend a lot of time and resources on growing the game. And as I mentioned earlier, participation is a big part of that, but it's not just participation. We think there are 3 things that have to work in concert to grow baseball in these markets. And that's participation, it's content, and it's live events. And so if you have those 3 things working together, you have baseball in America, you have baseball in Japan, you have soccer in Brazil, you have rugby in New Zealand, right? Those 3 things work together really to make any sport successful. And so the participation side I kind of talked about already. The content side is, American time zones, or for the time zones connected with American sports are really, really difficult. In other words, the World Series comes on at 2 a.m. in Paris and 9 a.m. in Tokyo, right? Terrible times to be able to consume the product. So we have to recognize that and work around it. And so we've gone, and again, the digital revolution has really helped us with that. But we can now have condensed games. We can now have localized content with influencers in different markets that are, as I like to say, metaphorically putting their arm around us and saying, "Isn't baseball cool?" And creating that kind of content, as we say, the right content on the right device at the right time. And then the third thing is live events. And that live event can be an MLB game. We were very fortunate to operate the Yankees Red Sox series, excuse me, in 2019 in London. Look for more of that. We'll probably be in a position in the next 6 to 8 months to announce some really cool places we think we're going to be able to go in the next play plan. But some of it is much more humble. It's a fan exhibit or fan-facing opportunity where a kid or an adult can get in a batting cage, with the VR home run derby and go hit balls, right? It's a place where our brand comes to life. So you do those 3 things. And now where do we do it? We're going to, like, as I said, over-index in 5 markets. Those markets are India, China, Mexico, UK, and Germany. Doesn't mean we're not going to do things in other markets, but those are going to be places that we think in the next, 15 years, baseball has a chance to really, really, to grow, to develop deep roots, and to make those countries baseball playing nations, much the way Japan is right now.
Yeah, and I love the other part you said about, greater participation. And I want to jump on that for a second because, I'm real passionate about the youth, making sure that young kids play the game. And in order to, it's great to get the kids, I'm kind of going backwards a little bit. It's great to get the kids to play the game, but like you talked about it's got to be long-term, and you guys have a long-term plan because, as we know, and the commissioner knows this too, because he mentioned it, at a certain age, kids are going to quit the sport. Now, I think sometimes we use excuses about, technology, or they just do something else. I think a lot of times, it's just my personal opinion from my experience, I think a lot of times kids quit the game because it's no longer fun for them. And one of the reasons, and we have tremendous volunteers in the US and around the world. Probably the biggest organization of coaches is your volunteers, even though it's not an organized group. But they're so critical and so important to that long-term development. So I know MLB also has a coaching program that, and I know that, and a WBSC obviously has a coaching program. It's so critical. Talk about how important that is, because it's not just about getting them to play the game, it's getting them to stay as long as possible.
You're 100% right in that. And I can say that both from what I've seen in my job, but also, I'm living in Japan for 16 years. I was a coach both in the Japanese system and in the expat system, and it was remarkable, the differences, where the Japanese system, although the coaches on our team were just so dedicated to the players, and my oldest son played 7 years in Japanese baseball, wasn't necessarily a lot of fun. And it was a job. And so it was 8 hours on Saturday and Sunday, year round. And I couldn't believe my oldest stayed with it. My youngest didn't. My youngest did it for about 6 months and said, I'm done. I want to go play football. Yeah. But the other one stayed all the way through. But then I also coached expat teams, and it was much more, we try to make it more fun and more, teaching the game, but also having, having the ability to understand how to make it fun and how to make it interesting and how to connect in with a 12-year-old kid is essential. So the work you've done and the work we try to do to coach the coaches, I think, is essential, because ultimately baseball will grow if we have coaches that, and the vast majority of coaches I've met that work in youth baseball are this way. They care about the kids. They care about making it fun. They know the game. They know how to organize the game and make it, make participation something that the kids look forward to do. The other thing I've noticed in successful coaches, and again, you're way closer to this than I am. I see coaches that learn how to connect with different players who have different skill sets, right? And so not demanding something of a kid who at 8 years old or 9 years old physically can't do some of that stuff. And instead trying to find the positives for that kid and getting them to feel good about the game, I think, is really, really important. And those are the coaches I've seen that I've tried to learn from myself as a coach. For Major League Baseball, one of the things that we do, and I'll give an example, in China, we spend a lot of time coaching the coaches. And a mutual friend of ours, a guy named Rick Dell, who very well, yes, has done a really good job of taking this not just the hitting and throwing and the tactical part of baseball, but the rest of the game and the rest of the things that coach should know, and imparting it in coaches in China. And we've seen some success on it. The kids like to have fun. They like to go out and play. It's different than some of the other sports that they play. And that's a selling point for us, but it all starts with the coaching.
Absolutely. I love that you brought up Japan also, because, you have the extreme, and that's a culture, they can do certain things because of the culture, the way kids are brought up. And by the way, folks, Jim's fluent in Japanese, amazing. I tried to learn a little bit of Japanese, and it was I speak Italian. That's a lot easier than Japanese. But sorry to get off subject, but the area that I think is also interesting, I think a lot of people do have questions about, because I've spoken to them about this, and that is the technology aspect. Major League Baseball obviously is using technology to reach out to kids, to reach out to more fans. How do you balance using technology, which I think is important, and not getting them to be using that technology too much because you want to get them out on the field?
Really good question. The hope is, if you get a kid playing MLB The Show or the other games that we have, that will translate into them participating, right, and becoming players, right? And we see that has worked, right? There are plenty of cases where we're able to make that transfer over. participation in and of itself is not it's not the only KPI that we look for, right? So we can get a boy or girl who might play our game, virtually, and bring them along the journey to become a fan, and that's okay, right? We want to move them into that participation pyramid if we can, and so we try to do that. We try to align things. If we run a esports tournament in a country, we try to align that with actual real participation. So you can say, hey, you were just Aaron Judge out on the field here, or on your PS2. Now go and try to become Aaron Judge on the field. So it's a challenge, but it's not something that is we worry too much about, because what we're trying to do is get engagement and take these kids on a journey. And we hope that that's both a virtual journey and a real journey.
Makes sense. If they see the excitement on the game, like you said about major league players, boy, that can get exciting. So I want to do the same thing. Makes total sense. I love it. I think technology is important in the game, not just from a promotional standpoint, but also, as we all know, from a coaching development standpoint, it helps. And we see it now growing more and more worldwide. The other part of this is you've got your pilot program. You've got your programs worldwide. There's some programs, when they don't work in certain areas, you got to make adjustments. Talk about maybe to the federations here, adjustments that they may make, even though, because a lot of times as a coach, you're going along, you're doing stuff, this isn't working. I got to make an adjustment here. If I don't make an adjustment, kids are going to not have fun. Talk about maybe something like that.
Yeah, what we've noticed, the strategy document that I kind of sent you and that we're working under right now, we spent a lot of time on that, and that partly came from new information that we learned through research, but a lot of it came through just trial and error. And we know that there are things that work and things that don't work. And so what we've tried to do is really kind of hone down and say, okay, what are we good at and what can we do to help grow baseball? The important thing about everything that I just talked about in those countries that I mentioned is a really, really close link up with the federations. Major League Baseball essentially is, we'll go in and we'll operate things, and at some point we will reduce that investment in that market, right? And the federations will be there forever. This is their sport. This is their country. And really what we're trying to do is make baseball a French sport, a Chinese sport, an Indian sport. It's played in America, but it's not an American sport, because we mentioned soccer earlier. Talk to a Brazilian about soccer and try to tell a Brazilian that it's a British sport because it was founded in Huddersfield, England back in the day. You can't do that. You can't tell an Argentine that. You can't tell a German that, an Italian that. It's their sport, right? And we have that in places like the Dominican and Cuba and Japan. Japan, it's a Japanese sport played in America. And that's what we want to do around the world. So that only works with federations that are strong, that can help grow that pyramid that we talked about, reach, retention, and elite development. And one of the things that we're looking to do in our relationship with WBSC is see what we can do to help that and help those federations get stronger, not just in those 5 countries, but elsewhere, that we can come in with some of the expertise we have to help them, grow and really grow the roots that are needed to have long-term success.
Awesome. Hey, folks, if you're looking at live on Facebook or YouTube, yes, I'm looking down at my phone. Normally that's not respectful, but I'm looking because we've got questions hopefully on Facebook, and I want to make sure if we do have questions, make sure you type them in the comments section and get to them. Jim, the other part about this, you did mention this, and I want to just delve into a little bit more, the communication and working together with whether it be the WBSC or any organization worldwide that's trying to develop the sport. Just recently, about 3 months ago, because of MLB and WBSC, a new federation came about, Bhutan baseball, right? There's just a small example. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. talk about the relationship with the WBSC and other organizations. That's critical because, you know, it's just like coaching. We almost all have to be on the same page, because if we're doing the same thing in one country, we're just overloading it too much with the same thing, where we could be spreading it out a lot better.
100%. One of the things we've had a relationship with WBSC and the predecessor of the IBAF for as long as I've been doing this, which is since 1998 on the international side. But that relationship really has grown, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years. And a lot of that, you know, is due to the success that WBSC has had in things like the Premier 12 and taking, quite frankly, some of the revenue that they've made from that tournament and reinvesting it into different programs. And, you know, Baseball 5, as we mentioned earlier, was a good example. The professionalism that we see in the way they operate the tournaments, you know, the television production, you know, we talked about, you know, federation support. You know, I think you'll see something hopefully soon where, you know, we're looking to formalize an agreement with WBSC, what we can work in with them to help federations in developing countries where not just baseball isn't necessarily popular, but there are challenges that go beyond sports in those markets, in those countries, and ways that we can come in and work together to help, you know, not just the game of baseball grow, but, you know, sports in general grow. So we have an awful lot of respect for them. You know, Ricardo Ferrari, I think, has done a great job. I've known Ricardo for, you know, 28 years. You know, Michael Schmidt and there are many others. I hate to mention anyone's name because there's a lot of really good, smart people there. So what I like about the relationship with WBSC is that we can work in alignment, where we can do some things that may be a little bit different for them, but also that they're doing things, particularly on the federation development side and coaching development, and, you know, the WBSC Academy that they have, which is really, really impressive. So I think we can complement each other and make sure we're staying in the right lanes and continue to grow baseball around the world.
Yeah, and folks, if you need to go to WBSC.org. That might be new to you. I know MLB is not new to you, but WBSC might be fairly new to you. They've done an outstanding job. I agree with you, Jim. The vision and some of the programs they've developed has really brought up the game, and you're seeing it by new federations. You're seeing it by participation growing, and of course, working with MLB. That, you know, you have to go hand in hand. Your time is valuable. I really appreciate it, but I want to get to this. Because this question comes up a lot also. And folks, you know, we don't have a script. I'm just asking Jim questions. You know, when it comes to, now we're talking about the highest levels. We got the WBSC, the World Baseball Classic. We also have the Olympics. You know, there's that fine line, because I think folks sometimes don't understand this. You know, people always say, well, how come there's not major league players in the Olympics? You know, some of us understand it because you've told us it's not that easy. It's not like other sports like hockey and, you know, other sports where they can shut down the season for 2 weeks because they're not going to be playing outdoors in November, December. So you have the Olympics, which you have to kind of balance and do your best to help, but it's not easy. And then you've got the World Baseball Classic at a high level all over the world, which is really helping develop the sport. Talk about both to our audience, how important they are.
Yeah, I'll start with the Olympics. Look, we have been very, very clear since, really since the late 90s, when this first came up about baseball being excluded after the Beijing Games in 2008. We believe that baseball belongs in the Olympics. We believe by every criteria that the IOC had set up that baseball deserves to be in the Olympics. We know that it is really, really important. We know that federations get money through the Olympic committees in their countries. So having baseball included as an Olympic sport is really, really important. We worked really hard, hand in hands with IBAF, you know, Harvey Schiller, who was the head of the IBAF at the time, and later with Ricardo Ferrari. We are continuing to work with them on finding ways that we can, you know, put baseball back in the Olympics and keep it in the Olympics. Whether that, I'm not sure that major league players is the litmus test in terms of what is necessary to have baseball back in the Olympics. But we are continuing to talk to Ricardo, to Michael. We're taking our cues from them. Ricardo's done a lot of work to have baseball kind of reinstated, and we're going to continue to talk to him and see if there are ways that we can and help him and assist him kind of in his goal of putting baseball back in permanently, baseball and softball. Mm-hmm. For the WBSC, some of your listeners may not know this, but WBSC is actually owned and operated by Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association. And one of the reasons we set it up is knowing that there was challenges with baseball in the Olympics and knowing where the IOC was headed. We set up the WBC to do a couple things. One is to have the top players in the world playing in a tournament setup that hadn't been done before, right? In country versus country, it had never been done before. And we thought that was good for the growth of the game. But also we set it up because we knew that there would be money that would flow into federations around the world, because it is the world championship of the sport. So we hope that would help soften the financial blow to some federations, mm-hmm. Because baseball being excluded from the Olympics. We've had a lot of success with the WBC. I would say that it was an instant success in everywhere except the United States in 2000, starting 2006, right? Yeah. But the momentum that we saw in 2017 when the U.S. won, what in the United States was really, really important. Every KPI was up. Our viewership in the United States, obviously the attendance, the amount of chatter that we would see about it. So we had all of this momentum, and then we had COVID, right? So it was one of the many things that really changed for all of us, was just losing that momentum. What should have been a 2021 WBC was postponed. We are hopeful that we're going to be able to be in a position to play this, announce the new tournament schedule soon. I think we will be playing WBC again very soon. I think we're looking to ways that we can expand it, alternative or auxiliary tournaments that could be WBC branded, that could be kind of keeping people's attention between each WBC, the 21 and the what would have been the 21 and 25 and 29 WBC tournaments. I think one of the things I'm really excited about, and I don't know if these guys may be your listeners too, but I just found my way onto Facebook. Oh, you're on it as well too, the WBC 2023 Facebook group, right? And I think it's 30,000 members now. And I joined that in January. I've actually talked to some of the guys that operate it. And it's so humbling / flattering / exciting to see that there are these people that care so much about international baseball and the WBC. And as I told some of the guys that organized it, it's easy for us on the business side of things to forget that I believe in the WBC, but a lot of it is I see on a PowerPoint, right? Or I see in budgets and stuff. To actually hear these, passionate men and women that care about international baseball and care about the WBC totally fuels us. And we're really excited about the future of the World Baseball Classic, especially when we see that is our customer base that cares so much about this.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I mean, as a fan, I can tell you that WBSC has been outstanding. It's been so much fun to watch, especially the last year. I think that really catapulted it even to another level. And as you mentioned, it spreads the game worldwide. It also, shows young kids, the opportunities that they have, not only to play at the major league level, because they're not all going to play there, but they've got college, they've got their national team, they've got a lot of different programs that they can be part of before they get to the highest level.
That's exactly it. You know, what we're trying to do, and this goes back to this idea of making baseball a national sport wherever that nation is, right? You need to have a ladder. So you can play on your local, to your school team, you can play on your provincial team, maybe you can play, you know, on your national team, right? Maybe college baseball is in there at some point. And hopefully, you know, at the top of that is Major League Baseball, right? To play professionally and or play at the NPB or KBO. But national team baseball is so important. And you know, America is probably the only place in the world where club versus club competition is the ultimate, right? You know, whether it's the Super Bowl, or whether it's the World Series, whether it's the NBA Finals, everywhere else, it's national team, right? If you're an Australian, you're a cricket fan, it's the Ashes, you know, England versus Australia. If you're in Poland, it's the European Championships with your soccer team, football team, or obviously the Olympics and the World Cup are the number one and number two, probably depending on your position. So we need to remember that, and I think as sports marketers based in the U.S., we need to remember that there's a whole big world out there, and national team competition is really, really important if we're going to, you know, find ways to help grow our sport.
Absolutely. Jim, two more things real quick, and then we'll let you go. Get ready not only for your main job, but also you got travels coming up pretty quick here. Biggest challenge that you have when MLB has to develop the sport worldwide, what would that be, the biggest challenge?
So, you know, I always say that everyone in the world is a baseball fan. They just don't know it yet. So it's up to us to explain it to them and that they are a fan, or show them why they should be a fan. I think that I wouldn't say it's a challenge. I think what we have to be is patient. One of the things that has been really, really impactful for me since I came back from Tokyo 2 years ago is I report to the chief revenue officer and to the commissioner. And then I have a dotted line to 14 owners who are on an international committee. And they are committed to this. They are committed to the long-term growth of the game internationally. And that is really heartening for me to know that they are prepared for taking a long-term approach, that it's not going to change overnight, that this could be in some ways, in some places, almost generational until we see this, but they know that it's going to take time. So I think that taking that patient approach, I think what we have right now is the right approach. I think we know what we need to do. We just need to spend the time, spend the resources, and take the time to go get it done. And I'm really, really optimistic about that.
Love it. And I love the word patience, because that's what we need in coaching also. We need a lot of patience and work with the kids, have a lot of fun with them. Lastly, this is just my comment, because I love international baseball so much. Folks, I'd love to see the All-Star game be international, you know, maybe the US against the world. That's just me, Jim, but an idea out there. But to finish it off, there's so much to this to unpack, obviously. This show could go on for 4 or 5 hours. You know, I just asked what I think, you know, what I wanted to know, and hopefully help our audience. Last, anything you want to mention that we didn't talk about that you thought was critical to understand when it talks, you know, for our federations or for people around the world to understand what MLB is doing to grow the game? If there's anything last minute comments, it's yours, and then we'll close it off.
Great. No, look, I think it's a big world out there. And the more people that we can get to care about the game, and to really work, particularly at the grassroots levels, on getting more boys and girls to play the game is really, really important. It benefits everybody. Baseball, to me and to you and to most of your listeners, is the best sport in the world. I firmly believe that. But it's taking it into new markets. I recognize that if you're in a federation head in a non-traditional baseball market, it's hard, right? It's hard to get a share of mind space of people and get people's attention. What I would say is that there are now resources out there for you that didn't exist before. And a lot of those resources are with WBSC. Some of them may be with us. And so, you know, be strong, have patience, persevere, and we need you. We need you to stay, as passionate as you can be. And if there's ways for us to help, we'll look at doing that. But there's some great resources out there. Take advantage of.
Outstanding. Great way to end the show. Jim, listen, this has been an extreme honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Thanks to MLB International. Can't thank you enough. Safe travel. See you in a couple of days in Italy.
Look forward to it. Can't wait to watch baseball in Europe. It's the best.
All right, folks. Jim Small from Major League Baseball International, Vice President, Senior Vice President. Don't miss that part. Senior Vice President, Major League Baseball International. Thanks for joining us. Also, thanks, Brian Kroc, our producer with Lineup Media Group. Thank you to all in the U.S. and around the world. Remember, stay safe. God bless you. Stay healthy, and we'll see you on the baseball field. Bye-bye, everybody.